Okay, getting started, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Can you turn that volume down, please? So, no, it's not mine. So to get started, here's your volume over here. Oh, just mute it. Power it or something. All right, cool. So to get started, everybody, thank you for being here, and those who are attending online, thank you. As you can see, we've got a really small group, and you know, that's unfortunate. However, the silver lining is this, that we are providing opportunity for folks to give feedback and opportunity for folks to weigh in on this this actually a life altering generation altering process, right? And hopefully we could have more people show up in the future, but we're going to make do with what we've got. So we have an agenda. Those who are online, that agenda is with the link that you use to join. And for those of us here, so how we'd like to start all meetings is we just want to lay out that this is going to be a very relaxed and organic conversation, right? We do have an expectation of respect with everybody, and that includes people who aren't here, right? And we want to refrain from being derogatory towards the nation, towards past people, past administrations, past events, anything. We want to bring a spirit of unity along with what we're doing. So we have that, and if there is anybody who you know, now or in the future that that can't follow those basic, you know, guidelines of respect, we're not going to share the mic with those individuals. Okay. um, so to get started here, the goal for tonight is to really break the ice of having open meetings with the Constitution Committee, and allowing the body to weigh in more frequently than just a couple of general councils, in hopes that general council would be shortened by continued member participation. As we can see, though, if these numbers stay the same, that may not be the case. However, it's always helpful to have additional voices participating in this process. This meeting has been slated for 2 hours, but we may end up ending early. And if we do, we're going to continue to shoot for a 2-hour meeting slot as we go forward, and we're going to be trying to make this a monthly ordeal. All right. So section 3 of the agenda is governing resolution, you know, and fun facts. We're all pretty knowledgeable, and from what I've seen, who's attending online are pretty knowledgeable of the governing resolution. And I thought I was pretty knowledgeable also, until we started digging in more to this process. And little by little, there's caveats here, caveats there that that rear their head, and we wonder, how did it get this way, right? And a lot of the trouble that we're finding is that as a nation, we bend the rules a lot to make things okay today. And by doing that, sometimes we set precedent that we don't mean to set, and those precedents turn into law, right? Or turn into the way that we just do things. One of those things, for example, is phone polls, right? Phone polls are very necessary in a lot of scenarios, but we turn them into a way of actually conducting day-to-day business, and that's not what the business committee was set up for, right? But somewhere along the line, we bent Robert's rule to be able to make it okay for us, and then it just stuck, right? Thankfully, the business committee now is trying to rectify that and get back in line with who we are and what we do. But that's just an example of things. Also, our July 4th meeting. So this is a little fun fact. Somewhere along the way, we started referring to it as general counsel, right? You say general counsel, I say general counsel, you know what I'm talking about. But it's been referred to, I don't know where that started, but in our governing documents, it was referred to the Quapaw Indian Council, right? It's a meeting of the Quapaw Indian Council. And somewhere along the lines, we just started leisurely calling it general counsel. Now, it's not that big of a deal, right? Until we start getting into documents and creating additional authorities for the Indian Council or for the General Council that weren't authorities that weren't enumerated in our governing document, right? And now we're saying, it's like, well, what do we call it, right? Are we the Indian Council still? I mean, legally, according to our document, it's the Quapaw Indian Council. But is that what we still want to be, right? Is that something that we want to, like, all right, let's call ourselves what we've been calling ourselves and let's change it, officially. So that, sure, Grace.
My comment is with the Indian Council, Indian isn't a proper name for us anyway, because when the Europeans came or visitors, they thought they were at the country of India, and the people they saw there, they called them Indians, and it stuck because it wasn't India that they stumbled upon. It was this continent. And so when people talk about Indians, they think of the ones from the country of India. They're the real Indians, but we kind of got the name. So in a sense, we're not Indians. We're who we are, our people. So.
Thank you, Grace. Along with that, for the longest time, we were the Quapaw tribe of Indians of Oklahoma, right? That was our official name. Yeah. And maybe that's something, so that's not something that's on the upper echelon of items that we'd like to address, but those are things that we need to address at some point, right? The governing resolution, and how many times has it been amended? I've looked at this and counted this a number of times, and I always forget, right? 9 times, 9 amendments on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, on 8 different occasions. Oh, see, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different occasions. We had 11 amendments, right? And the amendments that were made were around the membership ordinance, the business committee, section 3 of the business committee, identifying candidacy and who's allowed to be a candidate, and changing the age, and a $50 fee, which has stuck since, for the past 30 years. And then 99 I have.
The absentee was 99.
Okay. I gotta check now. I gotta check. $99, a $50 filing fee. Yeah. Amendment 9/1899C. So in September of 99, there were 4 amendments made. And here's another fun fact about our governing resolution, is that at that particular special meeting of the Indian Council, there were 12 people who were present. 12 people made 4 amendments to our governing resolution, right? And that's the kind of things that are capable today. We're still capable of doing the exact same thing today. Um, mm, yeah.
Even in the what 80, 88, 89, there was I think 70 or something.
87, there was, yeah, a low number. There's only 27 who showed up to general council.
27.
Mhm.
Those numbers stayed the same until about 2000. I was saying those numbers stayed the same, I think, until about 2005 with the introduction of giveaways. And then it increased slightly. I think it went up to like 200 something. Okay, so it jumped, it actually hit over 100. There was 198 in 2005, 115 in 2006. With downstream, it jumped up to 283. And that number, the highest number that we've ever actually got, I think was 2017. 2017, we had 700 individuals at general council. 698 in 2018, and it's gone down ever since.
Do you know what the numbers are now?
Don't have the.
That'd be good for us to compile. So we have. So why was our governing resolution created? So in the mid-50s, the Quapaw Nation, Grace, maybe you could help me with some of this history if I miss anything also. In the mid-50s, we had a settlement that was coming back to the Quapaws. And a part of that settlement was contested and in how it was being paid out. Surprise, surprise, history repeats itself, right? So it was being contested on how that settlement was being paid out and who had the actual authority to determine how that was being paid out. And at that time, we didn't have any structure confirmed with the BIA. We had our own way of doing things, but there was no, so what was contested in court was that our leaders at the time didn't have the authority to say who's able to receive this money and who's not able to receive this money. So a part of that was for us to be able to receive that, we had to create a governing document. And so our governing resolution was born. It's not ours. I'd love to say that we sat around and had meetings like this to decide what's in the best interest of it, but it was a document that was brought to us by the Indian agent and said, here, go ahead and use this. Exactly. And it's what worked and it's stuck ever since, right? So so the document was born that we're governed by, right? We are trying to thrive as a people based on a document that is designed to tear us apart, right? When you want to get into the nitty gritty of things and why we have to prove ourselves to somebody else, that's what we really get down to, is that these types of governance was meant for us to separate ourselves. Okay. So that's why our governing resolution was created. And
You guys know who wrote it?
who wrote it?
So the governing resolution for the Quapaws was not written by Quapaws. Bureau of Indian Affairs wrote the governing resolution for us. Do you guys know what rights we have as the Quapaw Indian Council? There's yeah, we have a lot of power, right? A lot of authority through that. So there was over the last several years, I've heard talk of a resolution that took authority away from the general council. The only resolution that kind of did that was the self-determination resolution in 2004. Same year that the election ordinance was approved, there was a self-determination. And that what that essentially allowed the business committee to do was to handle, or rather it reaffirmed the business committee's ability to handle day-to-day business. Anything other than section, what is it, section 106? Without coming to general council. So even in the 90s, late 90s, and you guys probably remember this, there was an incident where the business committee did not come and ask permission before they made, I guess, a purchase for the tribe in the name of the tribe, but they didn't ask general council. And even as close as December, when we had that town hall, and they were talking about the ARPA funds, and there were some tribal members there that brought up, when did you guys start being able to do this? Like these ARPA bonuses, when did you guys start having the authority to do this? Because you didn't have the authority to do this before. And that's what they meant. And it's because we've stopped paying attention, right? We just kind of let it go by the wayside. And so the whole goal of this is for all of us as tribal members to determine what is in the best interest of us. What do we expect from our leaders? What are they allowed to do? That's what we can determine through this process. And that goes into the next one, which is, where's the BC allowed to conduct business? According to Robert's Rules of Order, they have to do it at a business committee meeting, which is open to us. So these phone polls, and this is what Roman was getting to, aren't really a legal way of doing business. And even in the 90s, I believe the early 90s, they had even said then that, hey, we're not going, the only thing we're going to do phone polls for is for emergencies.
Right.
And that got stopped. We don't know where, but suddenly there's been more phone polls in the last 3 years than there has been resolution. And you can go back through every single BC meeting. There's more phone polls than there is resolutions. You want to move into the next one? So I guess now's the perfect time to ask you guys, what do you expect from your business committee? And you can grab the mic there and what's your expectations?
I think before we get into that, just want to comment, some of my opinions on where. So the rights, going back to the rights of individuals. So now there's the Native Nations, rights of indigenous people, right? There's the Indian Civil Rights Act. And those are for the most part regurgitations of the Bill of Rights, right? And but they exist, and we do honor those. But ideally, what we would like to have is, how do we honor ourselves, right? Not how the U.S. government, not how the Native Nation or the Native Nations, the United Nations tells us we should be honored. It's like, how do we do this internally, right? Those are the type of rights that moving forward, I'd like us to be able to talk about and, enshrine for ourselves, because we could say that and cite the Indian Civil Rights Act. We could cite the I keep wanting to call it Native Nations, United Nations resolution on indigenous peoples. But those aren't ours, right? They might fit some of us, right? But they're not ours. And this is our opportunity to make this ours. So the rights that we're going to be enumerating at some point, I'd like it to be Quapaw, right?
Well, going back several years ago, it was a matter of some were working on a constitution, but they couldn't get it passed. And I think in a way, that's why we had the governing resolution established. But I remember discussions about the role of the business committee. They figured, why should the whole general counsel deal with these day by day operations type of thing? I mean, it was just getting too cumbersome even then. So then that's why it came about, well, how about a business committee? And they would take care of some of the business items for the tribe. So we wouldn't get involved by day-to-day operations mainly. They would do that. We have to think, though, in terms of, I don't want us to forget, generations ago, how did they conduct their business? It was probably just around in a circle, type of thing. But now we've moved forward now. And so we are indeed following Robert's rules, like a lot of other folks. And it seems to work in the sense of establishing some kind of order. But I think in a way, business committee over the years have been meeting places and they've been conducting business in the sense that they've been committing the Quapaw to millions of dollars in debt and that kind of thing without a whole lot of input from general counsel, the people. What do the people want? And sometimes they didn't have that say. So in looking at the business committee, the way it was set up, they could take care of some items. And most organizations too, you have the business committee of an organization might take its direction from the general counsel. And even so, finances, there's a limit. They can only spend up to so much, but then they have to get approval for this. There are some things that perhaps we need to get back to and look at again.
One more thing that I wanted to add, kind of to what Grace was talking about and what Roman's kind of referred to here. Up until the late 90s, the business committee only met quarterly. So it wasn't until 99, I believe, or 99 that they signed into law that they were supposed to meet every third Saturday. Prior to that, they just met quarterly. So obviously our expectations have grown, right? We expect them to do enough to where they have to meet quarterly. But are we at the point now where they should meet twice a month, weekly, and in front of the people? Is that our expectations? Because from 99 to until today, over 20 years, we have grown quite a bit, right? So our expectations need to show that.
Yeah, great point, Johnny. Some of the ideas that we've been kicking around as we're moving forward is that we could ask for them to have different types of meetings, right? So that let's say a closed session that takes away from our regular monthly meeting, that could be held at a different time, right? They just have to announce it, allow us to be present if we wanted to be present for the closed session, and then they go into our executive session and dismiss us. But they could have that on a different weekend. They could have a business committee meeting where they deliberate and talk about what's on the table rather than doing it behind closed doors, right? What's that?
I said more of like a town hall setting.
Mm-hmm.
When we come to meetings, when we come to business committees, for example, last month, there were all of these polls, all of those polls, all of those, and they just said, we passed this, we passed this, we passed this, this was the vote, we passed this. That there were not any discussions on, that there were a little bit of informed, but there were not really any explanations to what happened, why it happened, why they came to the conclusion that they came to,
Why it was an emergency, right?
why it was an emergency.
Mhm.
And there's just so much that I feel, and I'm sure a lot of people do, that is just, well, we're just gonna put it in this poll and then nobody's gonna pay attention to it and we can just move along and do what we want to do. Which there again shows that our voices, in my opinion, are not being heard because we are consistently asking for transparency. We're consistently, we want to know. We want to know what you're doing, why you're doing it. And then this is what we see. And this is not, I mean, this is a form of transparency, but it is not. And there's one form, one in here where they redacted numbers of a grant that we all know was $500,000, but they redacted that. Why would you redact that? That's our information. That should be, we shouldn't have to say, hey, I want you to tell me. It should be here so that we can see it.
That,
So I think in a way, we do need to take a closer look at it because another organization or office that I belong to was the fact that our executive director came in and it was again what she had done. Now, the direction should have been coming from the committee. We should have been telling her what, jobs needed to be done.
Right.
And there could be reasons why we would suggest not doing it. But she came to the meeting. This is what she had done. And it's similar here. Again, all of these resolutions and things are passed that's done already. Did we know about it?
Right, it's already set in stone. And then to rescind it or to change it, you have to go and get 100 signatures to say, we don't agree with that. When, right, exactly.
And even with the attachments of things that are being proposed, there are a lot of blank spaces there. And I ask about it because that's money amount. And they admitted in some cases they didn't know. I mean, we're not getting the information
and
that we
that's what
need.
concerns me. Like you said, they don't know the amount. Well, why don't you know the amount? That's part of your job as the person, as a member of the business committee, to know where those dollars and cents were. When I was a director for Osage Nation, I could tell you where every penny went. And if my superior asked me, well, how much money is in this account? I could tell them right off the bat how much money, because that was my job. That's what I'm paid to do. That's what we pay them to do. I don't understand why we're getting the runaround that we're getting. It just,
And again, we're expected to vote on these things without having all of the information. And that has been one of my concerns.
Thank you, Grace. Linda has a comment on online from Zoom. It says to represent the people of the nation and make decisions to benefit all Quapaw members, to listen to the people and take actions to direct the nation's businesses so that all members have a voice and or input. She also says that the BC is there to serve all the people of the nation, provide appropriate information to the general council so that appropriate decisions can be made.
So we talk about transparency, and Linda's kind of talking to the degree of what her opinion is of transparency, right? One thing that I've learned is that the use of a word like transparency without defining what you mean by transparency is unethical. You shouldn't even use the word. That's one thing that we've got to kind of narrow down, especially like with elections coming up and we hear from candidates and they're like, hey, I believe in transparency. What do you even know what has to be confidential? Can you explain to us what has to be confidential? Because that's a lot of people throw that word around, right? We hear a lot of BC that have thrown that word around. It's confidential information. Well, why?
Well, to that note, there's proprietary information. And I think that as far as personnel, those, I mean, those obvious things, the obvious ones, but as far as like when they spend $250,000 on, yeah, on time, why are they redacting that amount from us
Mhm.
when we've already been told that that's what was supposed to happen, but yet you're giving us documentation, but you're still not proving to us or providing us with the accurate information of this is what you actually did. So I agree with defining transparency, but at the same time, it goes back to, do they really have ethics? Because what I see, I don't think they do. I don't think there's one person on the business committee that we have today that is ethical, that's currently setting. I don't feel that any one of them could have any ethics. And that's just my opinion. And it saddens me to say that, because I do respect these people as individuals. And I do think that at one point, and maybe even to some degree now, that they still have the best interest but of the people, but there's serious lack for tribal members, because we have to think about generations to come. Just like those old folks thought about us. You know, when they were building these roundhouses before any of us, even Gracie, before Gracie was born, they were in that roundhouse praying for her and for her family and for me and for and all of our, you know, they spent hours and in those meetings and trying to make sure that our future was secure as a Quapaw person. And so that's our responsibility. We have to make sure that generations from now have that. And I have my own theory of what that looks like, but it goes back to ethics and transparency. You have to be able to stand for the right thing, even when it's not the popular thing to do. You have to be able to say, this is not right. And I'm sorry that it offends you or upsets you. And this is why it's not right. And if you can explain to me or debate with me, whatever you want to do to come to a conclusion or even a compromise, but we still have to have people that can stand up and say, this is not right. And I don't feel that we currently have that.
I think that along with that, and this is just my opinion, that I think that there's so much, I want to say for lack of better terms, but I think it's the most appropriate term, is that there's so much ignorance around what is proper and what is the right way that they just don't know, right? And the ignorance comes in is because we've got the same book that they have access to. Why haven't they picked it up? Right. And why aren't they, you know, sticking within those guidelines that are supposed to be followed? Right. And that to me is lazy. Right. Mm. Mm.
I'm not so sure about the ethical question there, because one of the things that defines morality from ethics is that there is a standard of practice. We haven't really set a standard of practice in our Constitution. So we can't really say they're unethical if we don't have any rules that they are bound by. And then that goes back to the main question of what do we expect of them? Right now, from what I've understood here is we have appointed them to be the custodians and managers of our various businesses and our daily needs. But we haven't really defined any goals for them. We haven't really given them any purposes. And the only ones who really have definitions of what their purpose is secretary treasurer, and the chairman. The rest are goalless people that we empower. So we need to really define their roles and determine the restrictions that they can go to pursue those goals.
I wanted to add a little to what you were saying, because I agree. I don't think we can really say that they're all not ethical, because we haven't really defined what their roles are meant to be. But in saying that, what we've done is we have empowered several individuals who have various opinions of what their roles are. And I think that that's on us, right? Recently, that's caused a lot of strife. We've seen it. We just had a special general counsel not that long ago. And this is in no offense to the grievance committee, but they didn't know, what they were supposed to do, because they don't have any bylaws. And that was a lot of our goal. We obviously don't want to put this stuff in the final constitution. What we're saying is, for right now, we need to implement some bylaws to operate so that you guys can progress and you guys can protect the nation. And then in that point, whenever you do have your bylaws set, that'll be it'll be like the election ordinance. It doesn't show up, right? The most constitutions for tribes are 3 to 4 pages long, or 3 to 4 pages long. That doesn't mean that that's all their laws. That's the basic guidelines. You look at ambiguous language, right? There's a reason that a lot of these documents have ambiguous language. It's because they're meant to grow with the people. Ambiguity can be a really good thing for growth, but it can be a really terrible thing. And I think we're seeing the terrible side of that. That document that we have, the governing resolution, has a lot of ambiguous language. We don't know what their roles are. It doesn't define their roles. The roles that are defined have changed. It's something that's why we're having these meetings, because that's something we've got to all look into, something we've all got to change.
And that's why it's good that we're having open meetings, because we want people to have the opportunity to come and to speak. And we'll continue doing that, to have meetings where people can come and we can hear, because we need input. We really do need input. And it's sort of thing that our enrollment has changed, because it's gotten so much larger now than what it used to be. And we no longer have full bloods. There's mixed blood. So, we have to respect other people's ways of doing things too. But still, we're taking what action that we can to be sure that we're doing it for our people here, the Quapaw people.
Thank you, Grace. Linda Valier made another comment here. It says, shouldn't the nation's businesses' income and expenses be open information for all Quapaw members? Companies with shareholders and those that have to report to SEC have to make their financial information public to the stakeholders. Yeah, to a large degree, I agree with that. And I think that, there is a degree of privacy that should also accompany that. And I don't know where that line is. Yeah.
With technology today, there's ways to make it where only tribal members can see that information. You could, we all have roll numbers. You could assign everybody password.
We could have a private computer set up with no external links, and you leave your phone in a black bag, and you're allowed to look at documents, right? Like, there's legitimate ways and that wouldn't cost too much, right? Like, just to have all of our documents on a server with, one direction, reading ability. And yeah, I don't know. There's options. Don't know what the best option is, right? But it is a great point. I know that members have asked for financial information from the tribe and have been shot down and continue to get shot down uh, uh, I don't know the specifics about the financial information that they're requesting. I just know that it's of the financial nature. Yeah. So yeah, maybe some of these amendments that are coming forward, I think that we've done a great job on this first round of, establishing a FOIA process. Hopefully it passes, right? That now we could, submit legally, and get a legal response, that instead of like, oh yeah, well, we didn't find anything with it. So we just didn't tell you what the finding was, right? No, you have to give us a response. And some of this that's coming also, it creates work for those business committee members that don't have roles, right? That we haven't defined roles for. So I think whenever we ask this question about what is the role of the business committee and the expectations for the business committee as a whole, I think we're doing a good job in identifying some of those needs coming up with this first round of amendments that were presented for July. The next item is what's the role of the Quapaw Indian Council, right? What is the rights of the Quapaw Indian Council? So, I mean, there's not a whole lot that's specific in our governing documents of what our rights are, but there's a lot that's assumed. When we look at how to change the governing resolution, it's assumed that we have these privileges and rights, but there's not a whole lot enumerated. And some things that go along with that is we have the right to call our own meeting as a general council, right? But we have no process. So until we have a process, there's no real way to do that. But on the other side, it was like people don't even know that we have that right, right?
We're not
And
sure.
then we'll wait. No, we do have that right. We
but
don't have a
no, but we're-
process
yeah,
for
we
it.
don't have the process.
We need to agree on a
So-
process on how we call.
So,
Mm.
so like the chairman can call a special general council. We have that same right. But it doesn't tell us in black and white, this is how you do it.
Mhm.
The only thing that's in black and white is this is how the chairman does it.
Right.
So that's something that, like Roman's pointing out, it's something that we've got to really be like, no, we do have this process. Same with, another thing, if somebody, and this is kind of off in left field here, but if somebody has so wronged us that we want to determine some type of punishment, maybe it's banishment, whatever it is, we have that right. It's inherent to us, but it's not defined. There's no process. Now, the court system has that process. It's literally in their ability to banish someone, to sentence them to prison, whatever. But we might not have the right to send them to prison, but we have the right for banishment, and that's something that's inherent to us.
I think also our people really need to be more involved. It's a sort of thing that going to meetings, and yes, we vote on things, but are we really letting the business committee know what it is we want and what we expect, in the sense that we can't keep having recall meetings all the time. I mean, when we elect people, we want to elect good people that will serve us, serve the people. That's what we're wanting when we put people in office, and they take an oath that they will do a good job, type of thing. But when that doesn't happen, and then again, you mentioned process. How do we go about making that change? But people do need to be more involved. And again, I realize that some are, well, just to put it the way it was said, apparently Maud Supanow made the remark after Tall Chief died. She said that she was next in line, but she said our Quapaw blood is being diluted. So now we have people on our roll who are 3,000 Quapaw, 4,000 Quapaw. And when I was reading applications on higher education, when I was working in Washington, applications would come through, and yes, applications were coming from the students who wanted to go on, but there would become a application, and they had to show their blood quantum, and somebody was this much blood in the whole thing. But I made the comment when we finished, I said, someone could be 1/10,000th Indian, one could be 1/15,000, because there were limited funds. They couldn't award everybody something. And we're starting to get in the same way, in the sense that we do have benefits, which are wonderful. They really are very good. A lot has happened for us, and we should be thankful for this. But again, I think the Indian Council needs to take more responsibility in this. And again, part of that is, again, just involvement. You need to serve wherever. You should be welcome.
There are 3 pain points I see right now with the current Indian Council. The first is we're kind of ambiguous on what the Indian Council is, because we kind of use it in two different terms. There's the Indian Council that we send to vote, as in that's every eligible voter, and then there's the council of people who just show up on a specific day that we call. We probably need to define the difference between those two things, and then come up with some process to hold that single day accountable to the larger community. The second issue I've noticed is with our more open council. I don't think it's a bad thing that it's more open, but we tend to shoot from the hip in creating policies and rules to general council. The best example is the tarot thing that happened last year. We created it, but we didn't create any restrictions, guidelines, or who was even in charge of creating it. Yeah, there was no process or defining of what it was, what its goal was. It was just, do we want a tarot department? So that then combines to make my third issue is when we create these incomplete processes in the smaller one, now it applies overall and it doesn't go through a process to approval. So there kind of needs to be a middle step there too. So we have our general council of the day that they can then present their ideas, and then maybe there is some kind of second clarification council, maybe not necessarily council, but some clarification process to really redefine it. Maybe publishing those things and putting on, in my sector, we have something called a request for comment process, where when we're creating new technologies, we take the initial idea, post it publicly, and then people are able to comment on it. And then we're able to then take that and then present it to a more formal thing in the final process. So that's just an example. I'm not saying that's what we need to do, but I'm thinking that's something we need to approach though.
So what's the initial process? What does that look like?
Well, something Virginia is asking me, what would that look like? Well, I can't say exactly what it would look like, but I can give you an example. So let's say we have a general counsel. We're going to use tarot still for the example. Someone says we want a tarot office. One way we could approach this is we could, in order for them to present the process, have a full legally written presentation, which would kind of get rid of the current culture we have, which I really don't want to do. And then we could then just have it get like formally recognized and then voted on by the rest of the community in an actual election. But what I personally would lean more for is to keep our current state, where if we want something, we can then say, the general council can say, yeah, we want it, and then put the idea out for public opinion, and then maybe have some form of informal special council after that to really hammer it down, similar to what we did with the amendments. And then it gets sent to an actual election. And that's my point. Right now, we can have that, and then it never goes to the actual election. Because right now, since we're using the Indian Council or General Council to mean both things, it never actually has to go to an election if the people on that day decide it can happen.
Couple of comments. One, to follow up, she said that she likes the request for comment idea, that it gets information out to the people for decisions. But she had a previous comment also. And she said, should the BC get general council approval before taking on large amounts of debt? I wonder how or what could really work. Or will that process slow down our growth too much? Just her thoughts. It went off. Sorry, they didn't hear. So Grace was making a comment that sometimes in meetings that you get some people who demand an agenda, and that sometimes you get folks who might be a little more traditional and not like the idea of an agenda. Is that right? Yeah, and that we need to get the two together and build that bridge somehow. And I agree, right? I mean, this meeting, for example, we're trying to have an agenda because, I mean, we even said it was like, we don't want an agenda, right? But people expect an agenda. So we have an agenda. But if we could have an organic conversation, I think that, you know, we learn more and we participate more in those types of conversations. So kind of living on both sides of the street there. God, what else is new?
I think Grace and Mikkel, you both touched on some very good subjects, contentious maybe, right? But what we're really talking about here is something that was actually brought up at our special general council for the Constitution Committee, which was participation. Should there be a requirement for participation? And I don't know how that looks. Even for candidacy, should you have to take a civics exam, Quapaw civics or something? Know a little bit of our laws to be a candidate in our election. What have you provided for Quapaw Nation that we should vote for you? Do you attend BC meetings? Do you know, is it just that you show up at a powwow every once in a while that you think you can come in and do better? Because there's a lot, right? We're trying to mix culture here with business. This is not the business world. There's culture to this. And you have to understand the culture too to sit on that committee. Because if you don't, we've seen what happens. So, and then Grace, you touched on something too about blood quantums, and that's another contentious item, right? That's termination language, right? But we've come to like kind of honor it, like we find an honor in it. Like I find honor that I'm a 16th Quapaw. That's a big number for me, you know. That's how I look at it. But it's actually termination language. It's just like a lot of the things that the federal government did. So we have to go away. We have to find a way to move past that. Because even back in 1886, there's a handwritten general counsel that I have where they talk about absentee Quapaws. They're mentioned in there. Adoptee Quapaws are mentioned in this 1886 general counsel. So how do we move away from that whole blood and move to participation? Or should we? That's up to everybody.
I don't think we move away from blood because that's who we are. And I think it's important to know, and I agree that it is a termination, because the government at one point said that if you were below a quarter, then they had successfully annihilated your race. And it's apparent, because I mean, we have my grandchildren, they're quarter Cherokee because their grandpa's full blood. They're they're a 16th Quapaw because I'm quarter. And so I mean, and so when you look at that, it is kind of like, you're among some of the higher quantums now, which is crazy to me, because just 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we still had a lot of half-bloods. So I don't think that you can take that away. I mean, the big push now, or the big complaint I seem to see is, well, I'm real Quapaw. And so once you start putting that quantum in there, or trying to move that, then that takes away. I don't know. I don't think you can take that away. I think it has to be there, because we have members that are enrolled, and then we have members that are just blood. So I don't think you can take that blood out because of that, because they still have a voice, whether they're enrolled or not. They can still vote. They still have rights. Right. They have rights because they're blood, because they have Quapaw blood. So I don't think you can take that away. But I also don't know how. A few months ago, Joe Stan sent me a letter that my grandfather wrote in 1977, I think it was. And in that letter in 1977, he was talking about, even then, the trials and tribulations that they faced then, and how to get participation. So it seems to be a chronic issue, that the participation, and I, for one, I've been guilty, because I was, raised when I was raising my kids, and that was my focus, was raising them and doing what needed to be done then. So you get busy as a parent. So those things that should be important, they're still important, but your focus is more on your family and raising your family. And then you get to a different, like where I'm at now, I get to be an eco. And so I don't have to take anybody to a ball game. I get to just show up, which gives me more freedom, which is why you see me more, because I don't have those responsibilities anymore. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I know what the answer was for me, or what was going on in my life at the time. I had 4 kids that, were active and had, their lives were more important than mine. Their needs were more important. And so I don't know what the answer is. I know what my reason for lack of participation was raising my family. And I don't know how you fix it.
Because I think maybe this is where we start, right? We just start talking about it. And when more people talk about it, that air of truth, is what hovers and makes it safe for us to come up with those solutions as a whole, right? Because there's a lot to be said about how we were colonized to behave this way, right? And how we were colonized to prioritize the things that we do in our life, right? But we can't have that discussion until we know that we're talking to the same people, right? And that they know that they're on the same plane, that these things exist. Blood quantum, I mean, if you were saying, if you're a quarter, the government succeeded, right? But at the same time, if anybody had a drop of
Right.
black in their line,
Right.
they were 100% considered black.
Right.
Right. So it's a design for us to not exist. But we all have to be able to have that conversation in order to be able to come up with a solution around it, right? Because unfortunately, I mean, people will take offense to, on both sides of the street here. People support the country, people have this lineage, that lineage, and people take offense whenever something bad is said about, something that they may have been a part of down the line, or their family was a part of them. And until we could have those conversations of admission of who we are and how we are, not just who we are, but how we are, I don't think there is a real solution, right? It's just something that we're going to have to continue. Is like, yeah, that's the truth. That's who we are, and that's how we came to be how we are right now. Derek Jennings made a comment, and he said, if we use blood or genetics for determination of being Quapaw, we will have to keep moving the goalpost. It is a defect model on purpose. That's what we're saying here. It's designed for us.
Yeah, we're talking about the word blood, not, I don't think that those my opinion, I don't think those can be trusted because they're so fallible.
Mhm.
But my thing, if you have Quapaw blood, you're Quapaw. It doesn't matter if you're half. It doesn't matter if, what'd you say, Grace, 1 in 3,000. That it doesn't. You're Quapaw.
Mhm.
You have that inherent right.
So here's the argument to that. With that being said, should somebody who's Quapaw, according to that explanation, be allowed to be the chairman of this nation? There's the caveat, right? No, you have to be registered with the tribe to be able to do that,
You have to be an enrolled member.
and a registered voter, right? Yeah.
Right.
So we're putting our own rules on it, right? So I agree with you 100%. I'm Taos, I'm San Juan, I'm Okewenge, I'm Miami,
You're Peoria.
Even getting further back, we're way
He is. He's a Heinz
Brotherton,
57.
and that's all of me,
Right.
right? But I can't be on any other role. Right? I can't be, I can't go run for any other, tribal seat for any other tribe, even though that's who I am, right? Okay.
Yeah. Will we be able to hear him?
Can you hear me okay? Can everybody hear me okay? You hear me, Roman? Hello?
Derek, they're trying to get your audio to work.
Okay.
I can hear you on my laptop, but everybody can't
Oh.
hear you.
Okay. All right. If it doesn't work, that's okay. I can.
We're gonna go with my laptop.
Do I need to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. I apologize if you can't hear me very well. I'll try to talk loud and clear. Derek Jennings. I'm on the Constitution Committee. So I think some of the discussions we're having, I like that we're having them. I think that when we start talking about blood, you are inherently talking about genetics. That's what that is rooted in. As Roman brought up, if you're African American, they made a law. If you have 1 drop of African American, you're African American. You are Black. You are not allowed to own land. Those were very specific things that were done to American Indian populations and African American populations. We were on the other end. They saw we could assimilate. So those are, and I'm not talking about the DNA tests. I won't get into that. I'm a researcher by profession, but there's lots of research out there showing that those tests are just parlor tricks. They're total parlor tricks. They don't mean anything. So you really can't tell. It's genetics about where somebody comes from. Plus, those places the way they're built. I won't get into that. But so when we do talk about blood, we are actually talking about genetics. They want Western culture wanted to terminate us or assimilate us into being like them. What made us different and why we have treaties is because we had a way of life. We had a culture. We had a belief system that we practiced collectively. And so I think I'm not against getting rid of that. And I understand. I'm worried about people who aren't connected whatsoever to our tribe, but are enrolled members. How do we get people to collectively start having some connection to the tribe? How do we formalize operating in a Quapaw way, reestablishing a Quapaw way? It's ours. We can reestablish it. We can create new stuff. We're a living group of people. And we've survived. We're here because of our ancestors. And we have lots of benefits, lots of good things to provide for our tribal members. So how can we formalize those things and bring them into our constitution, our way of interacting with each other? If it's a basic, this was brought up earlier, a basic civics test about Quapaw history. There's a reason why we were persecuted and prosecuted by the federal government, US federal government, because we looked and sounded and acted differently than they did. Those are the things that made us Quapaw. And so now, but then we've adopted what they think made us Quapaw, that we were genetically a certain way and we needed to become another way. And so we start talking about quantums, and I assume there's lots of people here that have multiple tribes, and I'm Sac and Fox also, and I have Sac and Fox ties. I practice clan, my clan religion in Sac and Fox, but I'm also Quapaw. I grew up around Quapaw. I grew up, I went to NEO. And so there's things, I grew up in that area in Miami. I know the back roads for all the wrong reasons. I know the back roads because my uncles are drinking and driving. But I think those are things that we need to take a hold of and formalize. We can formalize these things. This is what makes us Quapaw. We can bring people together and then we can have a more common ground of discussion. It's like, you have to know these things to be able to participate in our government or to access social services. And I'm not trying to be exclusionary at all. There's got to be a path. We were systematically torn away from these things. We have to create a path for people to, at least young people, and they do that with the education department. They my daughters have had to write essays, very brief essays about Quapaw history. But how do we create a path for people to start understanding who we are as a people, understanding our history? So there is a connection and a deeper understanding of where we've been, where our ancestors been, and where we want to go. So I think those are all important things. So I think we're having great discussions. I appreciate everybody and all their input. And I do I've brought this up numerous times with the Constitution Committee, and Linda's brought it up too. Reinstituting clans. I think that's a wonderful way to revitalize. And I'm starting to think. I'm starting to think a lot of this is just, we need better leaders. I think some of the things is we just need to create better leaders, and creating roles for the business committee is not necessarily going to help that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Repeat that, the role of the business committee, what?
He went back on mute. He said creating the roles of the business committee are not necessarily going to fix.
No, I think, right. I think the biggest thing, and when I was talking, what I was trying to get to, but I went down a rabbit trail apparently, in that letter that my grandfather wrote in the 70s, he was encouraging community involvement. And, we were a family then in the 70s, everybody, and we're all related because we come from 5 major families. We are all related one way or another. Somewhere down that tree, we're related. And they carried that. We were still a family in the 70s. We were still kind of a family in the 80s. And then So I think if we can, and I don't necessarily know how that, what that looks like or what it is, because part of the reason that I even started doing the Easter egg hunt again was because when I found out that it wasn't happening, I wanted that sense of community for my grandchildren that my children had, that I had growing up. And so that was the whole goal of starting that Easter egg hunt again, was to bring some of the community back, to bring some of that, we're still we're still a family. And because this is this, and yeah, people come home for Quapaw powwow, but that's the only time they come home. And if we put um limits on people receiving benefits because of what they know, you're hurting people that weren't raised the way that we were raised. And it's not their fault that they weren't raised the way that we were raised. You and I grew up as brother and sister because we're cousins, but you're my brother. You're not my cousin, you're my brother. Not everybody has that, Roman. Not everybody's family keeps that and has kept that. But I don't feel like we can penalize someone because they weren't raised the way that we were raised and don't know the things that we just know. Because my mom, your mom, our grandparents, those were things that we just did because that's how it was done. And that's the way Papa's did it. Or that's the way, thankfully, my Osage family, it's the same. They do the same things we do. So you can't, if you don't know this, then you don't get benefits. That hurts those people. And I don't think that that's right.
I don't think necessarily that's what either of them were referring to so much. See, Derek has said this, and I wish he would have brought this up because he was talking about the genetics, right? Derek has said, I have German in me, but I'm not German. I don't consider myself German. And with Quapaws, you even brought this up earlier. This is not something new where we only have a select few that are involved. This is something that has happened. I call it the Great Dispersal, the first Great Dispersal in 1833, right? Our third treaty, where we had Quapaws in Arkansas, Quapaws that moved over to Osage country and wherever else. But what we're talking about is levels here. If you're an adult and you enroll today, you should probably have to know something, right? You should have to know something to get enrolled with the Quapaws. It's not their fault.
At the same time, so let me comment on what Linda said, because it kind of building on that and what Derek has said also. She said, what about using our family clans and create a representative system? Like each clan or group of clans can elect their own representative to be their voice with the BC. So we think that's a fantastic idea, but there's a large number who have no idea, right? So this kind of ties into the degree, I call it a degree of expectation. If you become a member of anything, right, that membership comes with a degree of expectation, whether you like it or not. When you are a member of the Quapaw Nation, that is no different. There's a degree of expectation. Now, this goes way back, that you contributed to the people in some way, right? However small, you contributed in some way. And that's who we are, right? To the core, that's who we are. We are helpers of people. That's what we do. And it's not a demand for you should know this stuff. It's like, let us help you know this stuff about yourself and where you come from, right? But these are the things that we can design for ourselves and our own membership, right? So when these people are coming, they're not instant Quapaws. It's like, no, Virginia Mouse helped me walk through these rights and responsibilities when I get around the circle. She helped me, how to make some regalia. She helped me, and so these people are mentored, because that's what we do, right? And we could do the same thing for our business committee. We could do the same thing for our chair, you know, that we have these degrees of expectation. Maybe one of them are the designated. It's like, no, this person wants to be a member. It's your responsibility, you know, as our elected official, as our designated person, to take these people through and let them learn the things that are necessary, right? Mm, yeah.
But how many showed up for those classes? Everybody's hitting on some really important things. They really are. But the problem, let's look at it this way. If your grandparents were American citizens, if your grandparents were American citizens, but your parents moved out of the country before you were born, and they became citizens of Greece, and suddenly you become an adult and you want to move back to America, you don't just get to say, well, I've got American blood in me, so I should be considered an American. No, they've got to take, they're still going to do a citizenship. Well, dang it, I got it wrong. But that was a poor example, but there should still be some type of like, and you talk about instant Quapaws. It's not instant, right? We have a year waiting list. But what did they learn?
Right.
But what did they learn in that year while they're waiting? You know, we do kind of have that requirement, like you guys have talked about. We do kind of have the requirement for our education. If I want some education funding, I've got to write an essay on the history of the Quapaws. But we don't have that for citizenship, and they get a lot more benefits than somebody who's going for their education. So
We went over a lot since I originally thought of this, but so we talked about genetics, blood quantum, and we're still on the topic of how to really define responsibility within the tribe and membership. So I was not raised Quapaw. I was brought in when I was already an adult, pretty much. But one thing I've learned from my Aunt Flossie, who was pretty much my cultural mentor, was that Quapaw isn't just the nation. It's not just a tribe. It's a family. When we talk about blood quantum and genetics, I don't look at my niece and go, "Oh, she's 1/4 my niece." I don't look at my Aunt Flossie and she's like 1/8 my aunt. She's my aunt. She's my niece. They're my family. And then moving on to like membership and all that, it's probably gonna become a less popular subject, but eventually there is that point where family becomes too distant. And it's not the blood, it is the participation. And right now we're going through a phase, I'm seeing it in the tribe, where unfortunately a lot of our citizens are doing a lot better off. And one of the reasons they're doing better off is because they're leaving. We're getting educated and we're going to where our jobs can be. And then once we leave, it's hard to maintain the connection back here. And long-term wise, this is not something we can sustain. Because if we have all of our skilled people leaving, and we're still giving them the resources and everything, it pulls all of our local resources away from here. And not only that, it's creating little islands of communities, because I know there's quite a bit of Quapaws in California. There's quite a bit in Washington. They have these little satellites that are kind of like developing their own family as well. So when we're talking about responsibilities and benefits, we need to keep the concept that really defines our culture from the rest of the world of how we're connected as a family in mind, and try not to delineate based off of some number set by some piece of paper, but more about our participation and our willingness to commit to the nation and our families.
one thing I wanted to make a further comment on was when I was mentioning, we're mixed blood. I'm 3/4 Quapaw and 1/4 Potawatomi. But when I speak to school children, I encourage them, know your background in the sense, talk to your grandparents. If you're German, if you're Irish or whatever, you need to know your family background. And for us, and I'm addressing now the thought of an elder, is the fact that wherever you are down there, we hope that you know about the Quapaw ways. And today's world, we're kind of just all over the place. So what the elders are hoping to do is to bring that to the people, and we have a chance to deal with our children in Camp Quapaw, is the fact that if they didn't get some of these teachings, now is an opportunity, because for the most part, elders, we wait to be asked. We go out there. But I think spiritually, we need to be stronger. We really do, because that's not showing in the way it could. And so again, I just hope again, whoever you are, you're unique. You're unique, and it's wonderful.
Thank you, Grace. It's something we've talked about before with this idea of citizenship and participation, and how we get more participation. There's some things that we also need to identify for ourselves with those rights that, and I use the example of a family. I've inside of a nuclear family, right? If you're living in that house, you've got some degree of say-so of how things happen, whether it's in your room, whether it's in the kitchen or your own area, my office, whatever. I've got say-so around that. When somebody is no longer a part of that nuclear family structure, it doesn't mean that they're not a family member. But while they're living off in Tennessee, they're not going to be telling us how we run things inside of this house, right? They're not going to tell us, what kind of cereal we're eating, the things that we're buying. So there's a degree of expectation around that when somebody moves away, that their voice isn't, we shouldn't rely on their voice as a weight of how we make decisions here, right? And that's kind of what we want to hint at, but not emphasize or overemphasize that's the requirement, is that you don't have a voice here, because they do. However, we also need you to participate, right? We're making big changes. We're doing big things within our community. And when you're a percentage of a required vote or required membership, there should be a degree of participation that's required for that service, that you receive for being a part of, enough about the services to request them. You should know enough about how to get an absentee ballot and turn that fucking thing in, right?
1,635 voters.
Mm-hmm.
135 votes.
Right. So 5,800, 5,009. Okay.
It is.
Mm.
That's an accurate number. Just got it from Steve the other day. And
So back
4,000.
So back to the idea of like who are we hurting, or who's getting punished by this? Really, if they're not participating in the tribe and not getting services, nobody's getting punished, right? But if you're going to receive the services, then you are engaged with the tribe to some degree to get those, because you have to take the steps to participate and get that paperwork in, right? So you're already saying it's like, yeah, I'll fill out this paperwork to receive these services on a monthly basis, annual basis, or whatever. But I'll ignore election time every single year. And that's not, I mean, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Well, it's one election every year, whatever. But for the,
It's continuous. Yeah.
yes, exactly, right? So these ideas, so when you look at it from with that lens, these ideas of kind of attaching these services to not membership, but attaching services to participation in some way or another, that it's not totally unrealistic, right? And there are tribes that do this, do these. And then one more item about the clan system, and we also want to, for those who don't understand or don't know who their clan is, or who the last member was with that clan and passed down correctly, you know, we could have a cultural committee that contemplates and lets them know, it's like, well, this was your closest clan that you were in, so this is what you're going to be, right? So it's not just like an arbitrary, or you're this and you're that. It's those who know can pass that clan. And then we could have something sort of like what Linda was talking about with the you know, clan representative participating in, or family representative participating in the business committee. But we'd also like to have those who are outside of this tri-state area be able to participate in the business committee, right? How do we make it so that we can create positions so that those who are taking their skills elsewhere can still help lead our nation from where they are, right? Sure, we ask them to come back for, you know, maybe quarterly or whatever, participate in larger meetings or whatever, but they still got an educated opinion and voice into these matters that affect all of us. I think there's a way to do that, right? And then we make that more enticing for everybody. So I don't have to move. I don't have to be a full-time resident here and give up my career to come back and help lead this nation, right? I can do it with my family intact, where they are, not have to be uprooted, and still participate to a large degree. In this day and age, the things that we can do remotely are amazing, right? And the things that this current business committee does remotely, and they're all local, right? So there's a large degree of that stuff that gets done remotely still.
That's already.
That could continue to happen though, but that we open up and that we make room for a seat at the table. You know, maybe somebody, we designate a seat for somebody who's not within 500-mile radius, you know, and that person is responsible for the folks who move away, and, you know, checking in on the affairs of Quapaw's, you know,
Like secondary district.
Kind of. We've got some ideas about our large members too on the business community. Well, we'll go ahead and share that now. And then well, let's get to the comments first. Okay, Linda says, we need infrastructure that will bring our people back and keep them around. Where do people that want to come back to the nation live? Where do they work? How can they prosper while they participate and grow in our culture? But even if they are not here physically, isn't their lives still affected by what happens with the nation? And then Johnny commented on that. Yes, because those services that require no participation could end with consistent poor leadership. They may not be affected immediately, but one day when they go to fill out those forms, they may not be there anymore.
But that's where bringing the jobs and the housing and all of that here, because we're big business. There's no reason that we can't be buying houses and rehabbing them and giving our tribal members a place to live, a lease to own, where there are hundreds of houses here. And that we as a tribe, we can buy, we can rehab, we can then sell back to our tribal members to provide them a decent place to live. And then we've got all of these businesses. If we change just a little things, like if like the BIA, if you go to nursing school, pharmacy school, they give you stipends, but you have to come back and work for them for X amount of years. You only change that mindset by giving them that opportunity. If we can't, the only way to change that mindset is to educate, and that's the only way we're going to get that.
There's so many tax sales right here in Quapaw that could happen. That these these companies like Briscoe,
Yeah.
are buying up houses in Quapaw or Dallas
And then they're right.
and
and-
renting them out. These houses that
And
are on our
not even
reservation, on our
rehabbing
land.
them. Dallas,
No.
everybody knows Dallas is a slum.
And
And he's just going to put people in houses that are
I've
not safe.
seen several houses in town Quapaw for sale for $70,000. The tribe should jump on that. immediately.
Exactly.
We need housing. That is a huge.
And there's nothing
item.
that says that we can't buy those houses, rehab them, and then lease to own to our tribal members. Exactly, because that's how you get more funding. It's pretty much self-sustaining after, I mean, it may take about 10 years, maybe 5 years or so before it becomes, but then this house is paid off and there's money to go buy another house and to rehab it. And that provides jobs, that provides housing, and that brings people home.
We should have somebody that their job is to watch this stuff.
I don't understand why there's so many things that we could be doing that I don't see us doing, but I mean, that's how you get people to be homeowners that are middle class, that don't fit the HUD. Right.
If they can't go to a bank and get the money, maybe they've got a credit score, just ask this company,
Right.
whatever it may be. But the whole point is, when you get people to participate in it, even if it's $300, $400, $500, which is low rent, even around here, right? $300, $400, $500 a month. That program continues.
It becomes self-sufficient.
And there's no reason that we can't be an agency that reports to the credit union. to the
Exactly.
Credit agencies.
And that also puts us in another area to where potentially our own bank. I mean,
So Linda made the comment, if the nation pays for someone's education, there's no reason why we can't ask them to come back to serve our community, at least for a specified amount of time. And I agree with that, I think that there could be options that kind of furthers our goals, right? That, we have our set amounts right now. For every credit hour, you get this dollar amount. And what if we double that if they were under the, agreement that is like, you come back and work for the nation for 18 months and we'll double this amount for every credit hour. Right. Experience, employability, you're guaranteed a spot somewhere. I mean, we have a hotel industry and a food and beverage industry that there's just there's so many opportunities. And
Yeah. We should be looking at a number of things, and you mentioned the area of employment. Present day working conditions apparently are not good. People are going to other jobs which pay more. So we have to be able to offer things here. And I mentioned to administrations some time ago, I said, well, a lot of the emphasis seemed to be on gaming. And I said, if you put all your eggs in one basket, you better take care of those eggs, because if you lose it. But there's other areas, like you mentioned, the housing, health, all of these, we could do better. We should be doing better for our people. I mean, we've got all these, monies and, we can do more.
We're picking at the wrong areas too, as travel. We're looking at certain departments and we're saying, what do you guys really offer us? You guys are an expensive department. You know, I talked to you about this the other day. I've broken it down for our department now. Not just the Quapaw Post. We create graphics for almost every department in Quapaw Nation. Their event coverage, public relations. Anytime you see an ad on TV or on the radio from one of our services, that's from our team, right? But there's a cost associated with that. There's a cost associated with informing and educating our citizens of things that are happening. And it's up to our citizens on if that cost is something they are willing to take, or do they want that in their pocket?
And that's part of the thing. That goes back to, we don't even have a voice to say that we want that department. So, I mean, and I think you guys do a great job. So I'm not saying that because I do think, minus the powwow description that's in the Quapaw Post, that's very disturbing. Minus that, I think you guys do a good job. But we have no voice saying whether we want that or not. But exactly,
And yeah,
exactly.
could
It
be
goes
better.
back to process.
Could be better. Mhm,
Goes exactly back to the process.
mhm.
And
And-
so what is that? How do we even,
The same way we talked about terrorism. We decide that process when we decide that when we form CARO, even the Constitution Committee, great example right here. This group of people, right? This was voted on by General Counsel to include a Constitution Committee. But General Counsel never said, this is who we want to be the members of that Constitution. There was no vote taken by General Counsel. The business committee assumed those responsibilities and put us on. Now, I'm grateful. Roman's grateful. Grace is grateful for it. But that was on us. We set the process. We didn't set the process. What we've asked the DC continuously is, what's going on with the CARO? We're putting it on this,
And we still don't know, right?
and we don't know.
And they give us an answer that sometimes is well enough for that day, but we still don't know. It's-
see, and that's
So-
what I don't
but
understand.
all of this kind of to reel this back in, all of this ties into the business committee's roles and responsibilities.
And that's the other thing. This is a constitution meeting. Where is our business committee?
They sent a message. They are in Washington right now lobbying for Bear. Now they could be on Zoom.
Exactly. Why aren't they on Zoom?
I mean, Washington hours, in their defense, Washington hours could run into 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. But so
I just, as a Quapaw citizen, it is extremely frustrating to see important, and don't get me wrong, Bear is extremely important, but to see meetings happen when you don't have a member of our business committee who could be their voice for, it doesn't have to be all of them, but at least one of them show up and say, this is, we're doing ABC, or we're not doing ABC.
so since the beginning, the business committee has done a great job of kind of keeping a Chinese wall about what we're talking about and what we're doing. Okay, now processes, the special elections, the general councils, they're full on board with all of that and helping us organize and getting all the questions answered. But they have kept a good separation between the content.
But they're
and
still
what
Quapaw citizens
That's
and
what I
they
was just
still
gonna
have
say.
a
As a
voice.
citizen, it would do them good, or any candidate for any office, to be wanting to participate in these meetings, right? But again, that's on us. That's on us for, allowing this laissez-faire approach to being a business committee member. That it's only important to show up when it's about time for me to, start running for office. And that's why we get the pool that we get, right? And it's like, well, who is this? Who is that? And and people don't know. And if you're running for business committee seat, I mean, should anyone have to ask who you are? Like, it's that kind of transparency that should precede you, into these roles. But we allow it, right? We allow it. And coming back to these the business committee responsibilities, I think a lot of what we're doing and what we're talking about right now is our responsibility as a nation to kind of lay that path for the business committee. We don't do a well enough job to tell the business committee what we really want. Our role, one of our primary roles is to designate the business that we want conducted, right? And over the past 2 decades, they've told us the business that's being conducted, and hey, is it okay if we do this? We already spent, $6 million. It's like, well, all right, we're in it now.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Right. Exactly. Like in the town hall for the ARPA, you've spent 50 some odd $million and now you're telling us, here's this 10 million that,
But nobody questioned, the reason we didn't question.
you know what I mean?
because
That's what we're conditioned to.
the past 22 years.
That was a bad number. I mean, it was going longer than that, but.
Well, I mean, but but-
Late night, when
it's still the same. I mean, the example is still the same.
Mhm.
And I mean, and like you said, we are conditioned to them coming back and saying, well, this is what we did.
Mhm.
Here it is.
Mhm.
Well, that's really not,
And by the time we have the chance to complain, it's too late.
it's too late,
Yeah,
right?
It's
And that's
already-
the version of transparency.
What we asked, not only a FOIA request, but also that all resolutions are posted at least 10 days prior to them being voted on.
Mhm.
So that we do have an opportunity to say, we don't like it.
We can
Because-
show up.
Because there has been resolutions and times when the business committee has wrote resolutions and passed them into law that affected our governing document.
Yeah.
Right, 2011, perfect example, 021-511-8. Luckily, Jim Greenfeather stood up at general council. None of us even knew about this. None of us knew about this resolution that affected us so deeply that it stripped any authority the grievance committee had. But Jim Greenfeather stood up at general council 6 months after it was passed and said, our hands are tied. Can we rescind this resolution? And general council said, yeah, let's rescind it. But we didn't even have to because it was null and void because it affected the general council. It should have never been passed into law. It had no authority. But that's still, there could be several others that we haven't seen.
And there are a handful of items that we have found along, the discovery process of our own governance is that things are happening right now that we passed kind of half-heartedly and not following the correct process, and they stuck, right? They stuck. The secretary is an easy one. The executive secretary and the roles and responsibilities the executive secretary has had over the years should never have been designated to anybody else, right? It was a motion at general council, and the motion passed that they needed an assistant. That assistant kind of evolved into the executive secretary. That executive secretary started to take on the roles that are explicit in our governing resolution for our secretary treasurer, right? But it's something we just let go. And we even complain. It's like, well, who's why isn't the secretary doing their job? Or why is the executive secretary doing their job or whatever? And we'll complain about it, but it's not even a legitimate item, whenever we go back and look, it's necessary. Now we know it's necessary, but we could have done better. Could have done better.
That's our role.
Well, and that's the thing is I think now there's enough of us that are from our generation of asking why. Because our folks didn't necessarily ask why. Things just happened. Right. That's how it is. And, you know, that's just how it is. But we ask why. Why did you do this? Why are you doing this? So to come now and say, now we want you to be accountable. Well, what does that look like? Because apparently we don't have that process either. You know, so I mean, beyond, you know, we don't like it. How do we fix it? Well, really, how do we fix it?
Mikhail wanted to say.
That's okay. So we're on the talk about being more transparent with the processes now and our expectations from them. Something to keep in mind is as someone who currently works for the tribe, and I have to, as a network administrator, I have to put big budget things every now and then, and those have to go through the approval process. And sometimes those have deadlines that would not meet the time frame that the next business committee would make. So right now, the phone posts fill that gap. So in order to fulfill the needs we're talking about here, we would either need to clarify what would qualify for the phone poll stuff at a more minute level, or make sure the meetings are happening on a much more regular basis.
Emergency funding have to go through the EFA, and the EFA determines whether or not you can. Why is our business committee determining whether outside individuals can get funds?
Well, and they're even doing more than that, and they're not getting. There's no accountability.
A couple of things concern me during the discussion of what we're bringing up. At the last business committee meeting, I looked over the agenda, and under new business, you know, a resolution was being proposed, and it had to do with the bear case. $137 million, and just it went through. Shouldn't we have had more thought about it and input on it? I mean, that's a big deal for us. And so that was another thing that I noticed that went through. And it's basically right now, you know, businesses, organizations, and tribes, they're going through this kind of reorganization or restructuring or something where they've established departments, and now they're getting executive or program people. And I told somebody recently, I don't even know who's on first. If I had a question, who do I go to? And I think others may be in the same situation. So once we can help them or whatever to get things set up so that we can run better. And I'm sure that's what they probably want too. But in the meantime, you know, we'll just have to give it some more thought, I guess.
Thank you, Grace. Linda Valley had comments. She said, human capital is the most valuable asset. The CEO of WorldSpan back in the 90s had a philosophy for business. And she just commented again, I lost my spot. Yeah. There's, you take care of the people first. Your people will take care of the customers, and the customers will take care of the business. I saw how that worked very well back then, and how the company almost went downhill when he left and that philosophy stopped. I'd like to see more information on the resolutions before they are voted on. It is hard to keep up with what is going on when things are briefly run by us so fast. Yeah, agreed. And you know, to your point, Mikhail, the the departments should have their own budget. The departments should have their own guidelines, right? Of what they're allowed to spend. And departments shouldn't have to be running to the business committee to request the permission to spend, to spend this money for a lot of the things that are getting, these decisions that are getting sent to the business committee. It's the same with the DDA, right? If we can't put directors in these positions that know how to make educated and wise choices, then the people who are putting these directors into these positions are the wrong people. Right. Because if we can't trust, if we can't trust who we're putting into these roles, then we need to find somebody else who's putting them in there. Yeah. And that would save a lot. It would save a lot of, those waiting periods, and it would give our treasurer, we have a treasurer to audit these roles, right? And when they could audit these roles and report back to us, like, yeah, all the, everything's above table. We're gonna hopefully, fingers crossed, have an ethics commission after July, and we could see how that takes, how that takes shape, because the ethics commission would hopefully do all the things that we would have liked to see the grievance committee do, but the grievance committee needs to solely be responsible to hold the business committee accountable, right? They can't be this whole other department, that they gotta still be responsible to be the check and balance, or a check and a part of the balance for the business committee, right? So hopefully the ethics commission could highlight a lot of these areas for us. It's like, well, because we started going through and trying to create this ethics code, and it was a nightmare. There was just too much that we had no answers to, and we're outside of the scope of reform and the Constitution, right? So hopefully that there's some answers that could come out of that. But getting back to business committee roles, these are some of the decisions that the business committee should know is their responsibility, right? So when they're asked, well, what is your responsibility? It's like, well, I'm responsible for these 4 directors and their departments, right? Or yeah, and that's what our board of directors does, right? The board of directors essentially. Well, to be fair, the salaries are new. Okay, so the salaries across the board, they're still in their infancy. They haven't even made it to 2 rotations yet. And hopefully we're bringing those salaries into the tribe. So, that's up for vote also. But then they're technically finally going to be salaried. They're not even salaried right now. The DDA is providing them, I guess, a stipend. I don't even think it would qualify as a salary, to be a member of the Downstream Development Authority, right? So no funds. They're technically not paid by the tribe, right? So hopefully that comes back under the wing of the tribe, and we do have some say so, and that is more visible. We're putting it out there that we want, if they want to change their pay, or if they want a raise or a bonus, they got to ask general counsel for it. No more of this, we put it in a line item, or the investor said we needed it or whatever. It's like, no, that's got to come to general counsel, right? So there's a lot of things that we think we hit the nail on the head with some of the concerns, and they're viable. Long lasting, I don't know, but they're viable for right now. And hopefully those things could be built on and grow organically also, because we know we didn't have all the answers to it, even just by going to general counsel and hearing all the feedback. It's like, oh, think about that, and then we had to rewrite and figure other stuff out. But as we're winding down here, did you have another comment? Oh, okay. Linda had one more comment. She said, I'd like to see more information on the resolution. Oh, no, that was it. We already talked about that. Does anybody else have anything? Okay. All right. And for the record, Abigail was here. Abigail
God,
hasn't said a single thing.
Star that somewhere.
No.
Say something, Abby.
No.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We look forward to having these conversations more and hopefully, you know, this grows, right? We need it to grow. We need it to grow
It'll make
for
the process
magnitude of what we're
more
doing. Yeah, and we're working out kinks, right? We're working out the kinks of what we're doing. And I don't want to commit to one next month yet. I'll know this week. We have a meeting with the business committee on Thursday. So we're going to talk about some of our plans of the things that we're going to try to unfold. We talked about a lot about processes and rules, and it's sad to say that, you know, this book, this Robert's Rules of Order, the 12th edition, has a lot of rules for us to follow, and we're just not educated in this, right? And if we were educated in this, we would know a lot better what to do and how to do things. And yeah, exactly. But then someone decided that it's like, no, this is the way to go. And we seen through the last special meeting was that if we didn't have this, we would have fell apart, right? We wouldn't have known what to do. So what the Constitution Committee has identified is that we need people to know more about what the rules are before we change the rules, right? Before we get rid of Robert's rules altogether, we need to know how to operate by them first, so we know how to have our own fundamental rules of fairness and have the Quapaw rules of order in a way that, you know, are meant for us, that we create for us, right? But it has to start here for us to be able to know how to, you know, God, slay the dragon, so to speak, right? We got to know what our real weapon is and inform ourselves and arm ourselves with the truth.
Book has been improper against us. Anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So these are some of the things that we're going to be talking about and bringing up in our upcoming meetings. This was really an icebreaker for open meetings, and we had some good ice that's been broken, right? We know we're not alone, and all of us, we're not alone in our opinions and what we see and how we're operating and how we could be doing better. I love that. It's like it's just going to stick with me. So with that being said, and Virginia, since you got the mic, will you close this out with a prayer?